Scratch is said to be the best boy in all of the Forgotten Realms. But today, we will determine if Scratch is the best boy on the battlefield. Today, I attempt to beat Baldur's Gate 3, Act 2, on Tactician difficulty with only Scratch. This means the only summon or party member I can control that can deal damage to enemies is Scratch. This doesn't apply to creatures I don't control, or when one of my characters is confused or dominated. I also need to specify this is not a solo playthrough, as without buffs and healing constantly, Scratch is essentially a one-hit kill. Hope you enjoy. Also, if you haven't watched the Act 1 video, make sure you go watch that one, as prior viewing is essential. After arriving at Act 2, Scratch proved his combat prowess by killing the random goblin at the start of the Shadow-Cursed lands. I had Astarion cast Light on the Scratch Urge, and we proceeded near the camp. Importantly, we do not enter the camp, just cross the bridge instead, without talking to the Absolutists. We made it to the old house where Karnas and the Absolute Convoy passes by. We convince him to give us the lantern very easily, without a fight, and free the pixie within it, who rewards us by giving us protection from the entirety of the Shadow Curse. Very easy. We needed to reach level 7 as soon as possible, as it will give us access to 4th level spells. So we immediately head to Last Light Inn to acquire some gear. We use Minor Illusion to lure the quartermaster down the stairs and far away from everyone else, before blocking her in using a wheelbarrow and a box. Now we are completely free to rob her blind of everything she has. We robbed everything. Some important items Astarion stole included the Cloak of Protection and Shield of Devotion, which I gave to Shadowheart for the Shield Bash and the extra 1st level spell slots. After I had sufficiently stolen from Last Light, we left for now, as we cannot guarantee Isabel's safety for me or Marcus. And with all the winged horrors being immune to crowd control, that would make the fight 20 times harder than it's supposed to be. It's very common knowledge that all of the Thorms can be talked to death, which avoids combat with them. You might argue that it breaks the rules, but none of these interactions involve me directly killing any of them, unlike pushing Corsair Greymon into the water, for instance. Old Garen Gothorm is first up, and I convince her to pay back all the gold she stole from other people, which causes her and her skulls to explode, giving us a nice chunk of experience, without even doing anything. I planned to head to Moonrise Towers, but got a bit too close to Karnas and the Shadow-Cursed Undead, and I knew it was no match for them after combat started. What did I do? I ran all of my characters into Moonrise, assuming the guards would attack them. They just didn't. Realizing this, I cast Haste on Scratch, and Karlach equipped the Blood of Lathander, which blinded the undead nearby, giving Scratch advantage to hit them. But because we cannot do any damage ourselves, and enemies rarely target Scratch, I equipped the Holy Lance Helm, which causes enemies to potentially take damage if they miss their attacks against Karlach. This, technically, is allowed. The first one, being an absolute genius, kills themselves trying to kill Karlach. I had Astarion use Falar Aluve to have Scratch deal more damage, and we make sure to Perilous Stakes Karnas, as he was our first target. Scratch bit him several times, dealing a respectable 16 damage per attack. After a few rounds, Karnas tried to attack Karlach, who has the highest AC, and kills himself as well. The others just do not fare any better, and we very quickly take out the final one. We were so close to level 7, and before meeting Ketheric, we brought the Fistbreaker Helm, giving the Scratch Urge another +1 bonus to spell save DC. We also have the Battle Mage's Gloves, but because we can't deal any damage, we're basically useless. I meet Ketheric and make sure to save Minthara, who's being tortured. We immediately attack them, and for some reason Karis joined the combat encounter, doing absolutely nothing. The Questioners hit us with some confusions, which causes Karlach to use Sunbeam on everyone, and Astarion to kill Scratch and the Questioner with a Fireball. Since he was confused, that was fine, and thankfully Minthara was still around, given we couldn't resummon Scratch. A hold person from the Scratch Urge, and Minthara attacked twice to easily kill them with Smite on critical hits. We throw an Invis Potion on Minthara and sneak out through the docks. I click to jump, and the camera forces my jump slightly to the side, instantly causing me to jump off the ledge. Well, this was embarrassing. Minthara escaping got us to level 7, where the Scratch Urge and Astarion learned Confusion, and Shadowheart got access to the one summon spell from clerics that is not controllable, Guardian of Faith. But even though we didn't control it, it's still very bad, so we basically never used it. even though it didn't violate any of the rules. We also brought Minthara into the party for her soul branding ability to buff Scratch damage, not realizing it works only on weapon attacks. I wanted to reach level 8 before Ketheric, which I doubted was possible. In order to get experience, I decided to help the tieflings and gnomes in the prisons. But before that, I went over to the Waning Moon to speak to Thisbald Thorm. Because we are a wizard and thus don't have very good dexterity or charisma, I equipped the Gloves of Dexterity to give me a bonus to sleight of hand checks. I had astarion, used some bardic inspiration, and a few inspiration dice to delight the bartender. Bartender? Next up is the House of Healing, and I make sure to pre-buff Scratch in case I have to fight, because I have notoriously failed at not fighting Malice Thorm. I failed 2 of the checks, but thankfully I am able to convince Malice to volunteer to be the next subject on his class, and he dies as a result. I really want level 8, so I come up with a way to deal with some of the guards at Moonrise, especially given they are not linked to each other. I would use Hold Person on an enemy and Peril Stakes on that same enemy to ensure Scratch dealt a massive amount of damage in just one turn. If that enemy failed the save against Hold Person, Scratch could easily kill them. I spent hours, hours, clearing out the entirety of Moonrise towers. I don't even want to know how long it took. But even after clearing out all of the towers, I was still shy of level 8. Next up on my list was the Shadow-Cursed Koatoa, because their attack bonus is absolutely awful, and they give tons of experience for defeating them. I had all my companions on the high ground before the battle started, and had Karlach re-equip the Blood of Lathander, which can blind any Koatoa that get close because they can't roll a save. Minthara also used Drow Magic Fairy Fire to give Scratch advantage on every attack roll. Now there were a couple of Koatoa chiefs that were really strong, but I had the idea to use Confusion on all of them to hopefully have them attack each other. This did work somewhat, as some of the enemies just passed their turns, but almost all of them were still able to attack Scratch, and I even needed to bring Karlach up front for an emergency aid cast on him to keep him alive, and Minthara used Heroism on him. After we eliminated the warriors in under 30 combat rounds, the remaining archers weren't much of a challenge, and eventually we leveled up to level 8 by defeating them. I made sure to have everyone increase their spellcasting ability score to 20, and have Scratch Urge eat Auntie Ethel's hair, which also increases intelligence to 20. Now that the party was level 8, we entered the Thorm Mausoleum to complete Shar's trials, but before that, we need Big Boy Balthazar dead, because both the fight in his chambers and in the Shadowfell are completely impossible, as he is immune to any of my crowd control abilities, as are his undead. So I temporarily grabbed Gale, who we haven't been using, to cast the knock on the door, and open it, merging the 2 combats. At first, I avoided fighting until I realized I wouldn't get any XP from him, so I tried to save him, but it was already too late. So no XP from Balthazar, but we don't have to fight him later, so that's a bonus. After Balthazar died, we fled the battle, then proceeded to the trials of Shar. Nope, I just used the fly trick from my itemless challenge to bypass having to do any of them. Despite that, there were still 2 things that we needed to do. The first was getting the Spear of Night in order to stop Shadowheart from leaving our party. The second thing was freeing Yrgir from his contract so we wouldn't have to convince him in Act 3. With all that done, we ventured into the Shadowfell and freed the Night Song to begin the assault on Moonrise Towers. Thankfully, because we cleared it out earlier, there were only Lincel and the 3 gnolls, who were easily dealt by my allies. This was because I just completely forgot to check the kitchen for anyone. I held off on bringing Jaheira with me because I didn't want her to die. She can enter her panther form and stay invisible the whole time. We confronted Ketheric and tried to persuade him into surrendering. Unfortunately, we failed the second check and combat begins. We buff Scratch and immediately haste Dame Aelin, who puts the hurt on Ketheric extremely fast. The Crown of Madness spell, used on Sostera, prevents her from using Fireball to murder Scratch. But in just 2 turns, Ketheric runs away, and because Jaheira is a now NPC and she comes up with us, she can also help Scratch finish the remainder of Ketheric's forces very easily. After the battle, we headed into the Mind Flayer colony. There were a few things I needed to do there, including freeing Zevlor and fighting Ketheric, something I had been dreading. Since I knew enemies with lower AC would be targeted more often, I summoned some zombies for purely soaking up damage instead of Scratch taking damage. I prepared to free Zevlor and the others by dealing with the intellect devourers first, and that's when it happened. I made sure to turn off opportunity attacks for my characters because, I wouldn't want that to happen. But a single opportunity attack from a zombie killed an intellect devourer. I immediately turned off opportunity attacks on the zombies because surely that zombie would die, right? Said zombie began to kill intellect devourers left and right, and each kill just made another zombie. This is what it looked like on their turns. I heavily considered reloading, but that was when I realized my last save was 6 hours ago, before confronting Balthazar or even entering the Gauntlet of Shar. Unfortunately, I had to keep going, and so, in addition to doing my next challenge solo, I will also have to do it in honor mode as punishment for not turning off zombie reactions. We merged several of the other combats to increase the amount of targets for the newborn zombies to attack. Then we freed Zevlor and the others, and combat ended us at a dozen newborn zombies. What's also funny is the cutscene with Zevlor just didn't trigger, and we proceeded to head away from him. We spammed aid and buff spells on the newborn zombies, as they are perfect fodder for all the enemies in the next fight, and barely do anything. With all the buffs on Scratch possible, we had to fight Ketheric and Myrkul. Scratch isn't going to be able to do much in this fight, as Ketheric has Magical Plate, an ability that reduces all damage taken by 2, effectively reducing Scratch's damage to 1 to 6. With his massive armor class, there was also no way we were going to hit him with Scratch, so we needed to let Aelin destroy Ketheric, because Myrkul has lower AC. I quickly haste Aelin after freeing her, and the uncontrollable newborn zombies make quick work of the Mind Flayer, and even quicker work of the Intellect Devourers, which is fine as we cannot control them. Astarion used True Strike for Reverberation, and Shadowheart landed a blindness on Ketheric, allowing Aelin to wreck him in 2 attacks. Ketheric turned into Myrkul, and his Reaper's Scythe ability can destroy up to 5 targets at once. It also prevents healing nearby, and gives our undead disadvantage on their attack rolls, meaning they're just running to their deaths. Thankfully, we land another blindness on Myrkul, and use Perilous Stakes on him to weaken him even further, giving him vulnerability to all damage. To weaken him even further than that, I had Menthora equip the ring, and use Exhort the Risen to cause Myrkul to drop his scythe, even at 30%. Even though Aelin ran out of her smite attacks, her main hand attacks were dealing massive damage to Myrkul. We had him down to 13 HP, and brought Scratch into the fight area to bite Myrkul to death. We were leaving for Baldur's Gate when the Githyanki arrived to take revenge on their beloved Inquisitor being killed by Scratch in Act 1. The Scratch urged used Crown of Madness, and Shadowheart used Hold Person to isolate the others from the Chirai. I quickly make sure to paralyze her, and haste Scratch, allowing him to do some not okay damage after Perilous Stakes went off on her. We eventually take out the remaining Githyanki, and once again prove to Blackith that dogs are better than Githyanki without a doubt, even if the Githyanki are 8 levels higher. That brought us to level 9, where the Scratch Urge learned Dominate Person, a key spell for Act 3. Now Act 2 isn't done yet, and we had one slightly problematic fight ahead of us in order to reach it. Not this one, of course. Astarion just used an arrow of transposition to bypass all of the Githyanki and reach the portal on his first turn. I'm talking about the fight with the Emperor. Though we can easily haste the Emperor, so we can deal with 2 of the Githyanki, the 3rd and 4th have massive spells. Thankfully, most of them target the Intellect Devourers first. The 3rd, however, fireballs Scratch, absolutely annihilating him, because I forgot to cast Warding Bond. This leaves only the Emperor to deal with the last Githyanki, but thankfully, the haste allows him to finish him off. We make sure to accept the Emperor's offer to evolve, and rest after a massive battle that we almost lost. We headed down the road to Baldur's Gate, proving you can beat Act 2 of Baldur's Gate 3 with only Scratch. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and like up the video. I'm working on a solo challenge run in Baldur's Gate 3 without healing, in honor mode now, which will be coming out fairly soon. I'm also trying to hit 1k subscribers, and with your help, we can. Go check out this other video that I worked so hard on, and I'll see you guys later.